Welcome, everyone. I'm Bill Hannafin. I'm the managing editor of The Wise Marketer, and I'm pleased to welcome you here to the CRMC webinar series. Today's topic is Inside the Bombas Customer Retention Playbook, with content co-created by Bombas and Simon Data. So Bombas, if you don't know, is a comfort-obsessed brand with a heart for supporting those that are facing homelessness. And I'll let Michelle Destein, one of our presenters, fill in more about the Bombas story in a couple of minutes. But it's really impressive that to date, the company has donated over 150 million essential clothing items to over 3,500 organizations across the US. So if you can imagine, it's an incredible contribution from a company like that. The story we're going to hear about today is the way Bombas has made a shift from a focus on new customer acquisition to retaining and existing and engaging existing customers. And they knew as they made that shift that they should be delivering thoughtful, personalized experiences that ensure that every interaction, whether following up on a cart abandonment or an upsell, was timely and impactful. So the discussion today outlines the strategy that Bombas employed to leverage the data to improve customer understanding, identify and acquire loyal customers, and adapt to privacy changes. There's some impressive metrics that we're going to share, and you'll want to take some notes about how Bombas, with the support from Simon Data, created incremental revenue, lowered acquisition costs, and added to marketing efficiency. So they nailed it on 2 or 3 different fronts there that everybody would be interested to hear about. We've got 2 really wonderful people here today, 2 experienced marketers that are going to share the story with us. They've got some real world examples and tips for engaging customers at key moments along the customer journey. Let me just introduce them both. Michelle Destein is Director of Growth Marketing at Bombas. She's an accomplished marketing leader specializing in growth, retention, and customer lifecycle strategies. And in her current position, she leverages a unique blend of creativity, analytical rigor, and customer-centric thinking to drive sustainable business growth and maximize lifetime value. So, Michelle, how are you today?
I'm doing good, thank you.
I'll tell a secret about both of our presenters in just a minute, but
Uh,
our second one is Kelly Sullivan, who's a customer success lead at Simon Data. And Kelly's an experienced customer success professional with many years driving client satisfaction, revenue, and growth. In her career, she's demonstrated a strong ability to build lasting relationships, to optimize customer journeys, and deliver measurable business outcomes. And today, she leads her customer success team with a focus on strategic engagement, proactive support, and operational excellence. So welcome, Kelly. How you doing today?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
Good. Yeah, I'm glad you're here too. I got a little preview of this at CRMC, and if people missed the recent CRMC show in Chicago, all I can say is that you missed it, and you got to come next year when it's in Dallas. Kelly and Michelle were a hit. I will step aside just for a minute until we get to Q&A and let Michelle get us started. I can't wait to hear the story. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you. As Bill mentioned, I'm Michelle Destein. I'm the Director of Retention at Bombas. Been there for over 5 years and leading the retention team for the past 2. So within that, I help oversee email, SMS, and any paid initiatives that we have aimed at driving customer loyalty and driving a strong customer experience with our returning customers. Outside of that, I also still do work a little bit on the acquisition side. So I help oversee our offline initiatives, so TV, audio, and direct mail, which we'll talk a little bit about today. Bombas is a comfort-focused apparel brand on a mission to help those facing homelessness. So we work on a one-for-one donation model, and we've had that since the very first day that we launched and since our founders were on Shark Tank pitching the brand. And with that model, we've been able to donate over 150 million items. That was a new update since these slides were even made. So continuing to just drive that impact, which has been really awesome to see and to help experience. Go to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit about our product. I'm sure some folks in the room are familiar with Bombas, others may have less familiarity. So Bombas started with socks. That was our first product that we launched. The reason that we decided to start making socks is that we learned that they were the #1 most requested clothing item in homeless shelters. And then from there, we also learned that t-shirts and underwear were the second and third most requested items. So that kind of dictates our product assortment that you see here. So socks were first, and then over the past 4 or 5 years, we've launched into t-shirts, underwear, bralettes, and footwear. And with every item we make, we focus on a number of things, but first and foremost, that connection to the mission, Second, a commitment to quality within each item that we make, making sure that if, you're going to buy socks, that they're hopefully the best socks you've ever worn in your life. And then the third is just our customer happiness and their overall experience. And that's part of what we wanted to chat about today was really in order to build a good customer experience, you have to know who your customer is. And that all comes back to data. So today we just want to focus on ways to leverage data for two different reasons. Number one, to drive loyalty and repeat customer orders. And then the second is to try to understand what makes someone a loyal customer and use that in our acquisition efforts in order to acquire more loyal customers from the start. And with that, we partner with a number of vendors to help make that process happen. So I'm going to pass it to Kelly from Simon Data to give a quick intro.
Awesome. Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everybody. My name's Kelly. I'm the team lead over here for customer success at Simon. I've been with Simon for a little over 3 years and working with the Bombas team for about a year and a half of that. It's been awesome to work with them amongst other brands, but who we are is really a customer data platform. We are built on top of Snowflake, and our goal is to really give marketers the data, technology, and the expert resources to really help stop the guessing game and helping them to deliver exactly what their customers want in the right time. So thinking of how do you best bridge that gap between your data teams and your marketing teams so the marketers can use all the data that is available to them. So really honing in here at our core, we're that data platform. We've got support within identity, machine learning, and various AI capabilities. But really beyond the tech and the AI, we offer that expertise and the guidance needed to tackle these marketing problems. So what we really like to think about is with the people, not only on our teams, but on the client's end too, is how can we become this one team? How can my team lean in and be that extension of Bombas's marketing efforts and really start to think in their eyes what their customers want? So it's been awesome to be part of that strategy, be in there for the execution, and then helping them use the tech in the best way possible to achieve all those goals. And then a few other brands that we work with here, SeatGeek, Zillow, and First Dibs, and then large enterprise as well, 1-800-Flowers, and brands from direct to consumer, Bombas, Untuck It, BarkBox, just to name a few. But across all different verticals is really where we have tons of expertise and where we sit today.
So I'll give a bit of an overview of our partnership that Bombas has had with Simon and touching on a few key focus areas that we'll drill in a bit more on today. Bombas came to Simon in 2020, and we really just needed a centralized platform for all our customer data for two reasons. One, to help us with overall data hygiene and efficiency, and number two, for operational efficiency and trying to make our lives as marketers easier when we're looking to do things like segmentation, building models. One thing that was really important to us is that as our business is growing, and like I talked about, starting as a sock company and then expanding to all these other areas, it's just been like an incremental amount of data that we've had that we need to be able to understand and synthesize and leverage. So the three areas that we've really focused on over the past 5 years now is completing our customer profiles. This is really helpful for us when we're thinking about like ad hoc analyses, but also in terms of segmentation, not just on email and SMS, but also on our paid channels. This has also really helped us with building lookalikes, which we'll get into a few examples as well, but being able to be smarter about now that we have all this customer data, how can we leverage it in effective ways? The second one is really about personalizing in key moments throughout the customer journey. And I think that key moments is something that's gotten more difficult as the privacy landscape has changed and shifted and increases in anonymous traffic. How do we make sure that we're hitting the right people in the right moment? The third one is building a connected ecosystem with smarter data workflows. So we'll chat about a few ways that we're doing this with some of our additional partners within our tech stack to make everything a little bit more simple.
So I think at the core of where Simon's platform is first stabilized is this thing called an identity model. And what this does is it allows us to bring all data in from various sources and create that unified contact profile. So now you're looking at each individual contact with that 360 lens and understanding not just who they are, but you're correctly matching all the first party data back to them correctly.
And for us, this has really come down to understanding the needs of our different customers. It's pretty obvious a lot of people wear socks, but one thing that we spend a lot of time thinking about is how there's different use cases and different reasons why people may be purchasing that product. I am going to be flying to Europe tomorrow, so I will be needing compression socks for a long flight. But that is different than somebody who needs running socks for an upcoming half marathon, or me on the weekends wearing fuzzy socks while I binge a season of Love Island. There's different demographics, different use cases that we're trying to understand at all times. So the product data and the demographic data are really important in play hand in hand. One example that I love to give on our end is differences within the different channels. Personally, don't use a lot of social media, but I'm really into SMS. If one of my favorite brands texts me about a new product, I'm on their website in 5 seconds. And we start to see these differences come to life in Bombas. So we see differences even in our product support and different channels. So some of our frilly socks are more dress up socks we see work really well in SMS, where a core everyday wide ankle sock might work better in email. So having all this data in one place helps us understand who the customer is, what they're looking for, and where we can reach them. And one way that this has really helped us is being able to take this data and use it for building lookalike audiences. So I wanted to walk through a couple examples that we've seen success with at Bombas, specifically with this holiday shopper. Probably not a huge surprise to anyone here, but socks are a very giftable item. We see a huge seasonal uptick in the holiday season. What we wanted to try to understand is differences in our holiday shoppers and our non-holiday shoppers. We wanted to understand how do these two different groups of customers, depending on their purchase time frame, work differently when we build lookalike models to run in our acquisition efforts. So you can see on the right what we did here. This is Simon's no-code segment builder. And so we were able to look at customers who purchased outside of holiday. For us, we wanted to really make sure that we're not just targeting people who are buying gifts and people who are looking for a promo, but looking for somebody who is coming to us during the non-promo season. So we layered in those date ranges. We also layered in some values for and lifetime orders just to make the audience more high performing for us. When we ran this audience, we saw a 19% increase year over year in conversion rate. And then the second part that was really interesting to see was that we actually saw an improvement in our cost per acquisition despite increasing spend by 23%. So for us, this was a great win and identified that this is not only efficient for us to acquire these customers on our paid acquisition channels, but also we know from the data that we have that these customers are more likely to be loyal down the road. And another example we wanted to chat through is we've seen customers who are coming to us for socks and underwear and t-shirts and slippers are more valuable for us than somebody who's just coming in for socks. So what we wanted to do is understand, are there specific things in the data for a multi-category purchaser that we can leverage and try to target those customers again through our direct mail program. So again, similar segment build on the right, but the way that we structured this is we looked at customers who have purchased socks and any of the other categories. And when we tested this audience against our standard audience in sock creative, with the multi-category audience and a multi-category creative, we saw a 36% increase in non-sock revenue. So to us, that showed there is something within this customer data that is actually indicating that there are customers out there that match these loyal customer bases that we can tap into from a paid media perspective.
Awesome. I wanted to talk a little bit, why does identity matter? When she's going in with her team to build these highly personalized segments and really trying to understand which audience should be in a testing or which one shouldn't, who should we build the audience to resemble? This is all going to come back to identity. So at the core of Simon's platform, we have that identity model, and this is going to be the framework that everything gets built on top of, all of your audience creation that you can then push down to various campaigns. And it's really important to think about, not only from a marketing lens, what does that mean when I know exactly who the consumer is and what they're doing online, but also from a compliance end. Third-party cookies, those are going away. It's going to be increasingly more challenging to identify who is on your site, what are they doing, how can I best follow up with them after their session. Various different privacy and regulations tightening, people browsing on multiple devices. the moment someone opts in or opts out, you really have to honor that as a brand. And if you can't draw that opt in or that opt out right back to that exact person with complete certainty, it leaves a lot of gray area in a marketing program. Super important when you start to think about how you then market to them. So, Michelle had mentioned she's more on SMS where others might be more on paid media or email. How do you know that? And then how do you maximize that content to them to communicate with them in their preferred channel? And how does this impact anonymous traffic? The audience that has come to you and said, "This is my email, I want to stay up to date." But if they come back to the site without logging in, there's this gap of understanding who is that consumer? How can I continue to follow up with them when they're hiding behind this wall of not logging into their Bombas account when they're browsing?
For Bombas, that identity is critical to be able to personalize in those high intent moments for a few reasons. The first of which is socks has a very short consideration window. Normally, if you are in the market for a new pair of socks, you're making that decision within a day or two, or even immediately. Not something like a mattress where you're spending weeks and weeks researching and comparing prices. And so we know that when somebody takes an action, either on site or through one of our marketing channels, we have a very limited window to reach back out to them to drive that conversion. So these high intent markers that are happening on site, like abandoning browse events, being on multiple pages on our website, adding items to cart. When we have those actions occur, we really want to make sure that we're retargeting them effectively. But in order to do that, we have to know who that customer is. And the challenge is that not everyone wants to create an account to buy socks. So we've seen that increase in anonymous traffic and wanted to see how can we be smarter at identifying who these customers are to be able to reach out to them within that short conversion window. My favorite thing as a marketer is a low lift and high impact win. We're all always looking for those. So we worked with the Simon team around abandoned cart and abandoned browse. We knew that if we could just increase delivery volume against those series, it could be really meaningful for us from a revenue perspective. So with Simon, we stitched together anonymous web traffic to known customers. Then once we've identified those customers, are they opted into our marketing activity? If so, let's go ahead and just add them to these campaigns that we already have up and running. So we set up those flows and then we're able to push those directly into Braze to our existing campaigns. And with this, we saw an 85% boost in send volume month over month and an average of 20% increase in revenue from those campaigns. So again, just want to reiterate, no additional creative, no additional briefs. Really, this was how do we take an audience that we know is active on our site, identify them, and add them to pre-existing campaigns.
Awesome. So I wanted to give a little bit overview of how is Bombas set up in Simon to achieve all of these campaigns. In the middle, you'll see Simon sitting on top of Snowflake. And what we're doing here is bringing in all their customer data that's going to be relevant to understand how we want to break up their audiences for campaigns coming from three main sources. So we have the Simon Signal and Identity Plus at the top. And what that is a pixel on site that's really helping us attract not only the known users, but that known browsing anonymous user as well. We're also bringing in data from Shopify so we can understand all the past purchases. How can we layer that into understanding who and when to cross sell or upsell to? And then third, connected to Google BigQuery just to bring in any additional customer data as well. So three main sources bringing into the platform, allowing us to create that one contact profile, allowing Bombas to not only have those real-time events, but to be able to curate different audiences as well. And then from there, we're pushing out to various end channels. So the first being Braze, which is where Bombas is doing all their orchestration from email to SMS. We're actually connected to Braze in two ways. One is just pushing that raw audience downstream, but not only are we supporting who the message should be going to, but what should the message have? How do we enhance that personalization when you're building out those messages? And then lastly, we're pushing audiences for various lookalike and suppression campaigns to paid media channels like Facebook, Microsoft Advertising, and Google Ads as well.
So I wanted to just give an example on how we've used specifically the trait syncing within our email program. One feature that we launched on our website is the ability to build a custom pack for our underwear business. And we had the question going into this of who is the right audience to receive this message? And we had two different hypotheses. The first is that this is a great message for anyone and everyone. And then the second was this actually is maybe a really great offering for people who have tried Bombas, thought being they've tried our underwear and they want to be able to try more either colors or styles or materials. We wanted to structure a test and look at a broad audience versus a more tailored, personalized audience of people who have purchased underwear. So we were able to leverage trait syncing to tie in our purchase data. Not only do we have first name, email, all default customer attributes, but a lot of custom attributes. Have they purchased socks? Have they purchased underwear? When have they last purchased those items so that we can layer that into our email segmentation? And it literally is a push of a button. We're able to dynamically sync those attributes straight from Simon into our email provider almost automatically. For me, one of the last things I want to be doing is building different segments in 3 different platforms. This makes it really easy for us to get those all up and running in our different systems. So with this test, we saw really meaningful metrics across the board when we looked at that more personalized and segmented audience. We saw a 450% increase in click-through rate, a 530% increase in our revenue for delivery. And then my favorite metric, which is 12% decrease in unsubscribes. When I see a decrease in unsubscribes, it's telling me you have sent the right message to the right person at the right time. Um, so just to recap what we've talked about today, just wanted to emphasize the importance of data and being able to acquire and to re-engage loyal customers. So we talked about the importance of completing and having actionable customer profiles through Customer 360 that we can leverage for segmentation, for lookalike models, and then also for any analysis that you want to do on your customer base. The second one of just being able to personalize messages in real time and being able to identify those increase eligible customers in our abandonment campaigns has been a huge success on our end. And then the third of which is just integrating other data sources and marketing platforms to be able to segment smarter and improve not only our email KPIs, but improve the workflow and the time spent among the team of building different pieces out in different marketing platforms and having that all in one centralized place.
Yeah, and where we're thinking of where can we go next in the second half of the year, we're super excited that Bombas is going to be joining in kind of in our AI program, which is actually why I'm out in Vegas doing our AI summit right now. But really having them participate in this to start to understand how can we enhance their strategy using AI to dig into their data more, capitalize on different moments or campaigns that we can bring to not only take it to the next level from a strategic perspective, but allow her team to work that much more efficiently in getting out various personalized campaigns at the right moment to really honed in, personalized, and segmented audiences. Thanks, everybody. We'll pause here for any questions.
There were a lot of questions, but that was really interesting. I was just thinking about the challenge that you created, and that's one of the questions that popped up is how do you, this is for Michelle too, just think about this. When you have a really neat brand like Bombas and you're creating just great products that last forever, how do you drive continual demand in categories that are considered basics? Is that
I love that question. I really think it has to do with a few things. I think number one, like I mentioned, those different use cases. I think for me, before I started at Bombas, like I reached into my sock drawer and grabbed the pair on top and went about my day. And now that I have more information than anyone ever needs on the types of different socks, I have found a lot of value in having different socks for different occasions. So I even have my drawer at home sorted by like cozy indoor, by athletic. I have hiking socks. And I think that's one thing that we're always trying to do is educate without over explaining. It's a very simple product, and we want people to understand that there are key product differences in the different things that we make while not making it overly complicated because at the end of the day, it is just a pair of socks. So I think a lot of it comes down to messaging and then also understanding from a segmentation standpoint, are there things that we can identify where, hey, this person has tried 2 athletic socks. How can we get them to try a third collection? This person has tried frilly socks and we're launching sheer. We think that this person is really liking more of our fun fashion type of socks. I think twofold in education and then also reaching the right person.
I think it's the art and science of marketing. We're talking a lot about the science today, but the art is think about that, creating a brand where you can create aspirational value for something that you might otherwise have considered basic in the past. Huge accomplishment. And by the way, you got some props here. The follow-up question was more of a statement. I love my Bombas slippers. So
Love
you've
that.
you've got some good fans in the audience, which is a good thing. So, we're talking about lookalike customers, and I think that's always fascinating. How do we find people that have potential but haven't identified themselves yet? And Kelly and Michelle, you're both talking about different data sets and website navigation patterns that you're looking at, but was there one that was the champion approach to identify lookalike customers? Was it shopping cart abandonment? Was it something else?
Yeah, I would say it's basically the inverse of our funnel. So purchase is always going to be the top driver for us. I think what's interesting is that we've looked at different lookalikes based on different purchase behaviors. At the higher level, has somebody bought socks and underwear and socks and t-shirts, the example that I walked through before. We've actually tried to do similar models with more granular data. Has somebody tried a running and can we get them to buy running socks if we do a lookalike model? And we actually see less of an impact there. And I think that starting at the very highest level from your purchase data for us has been the most effective. Whereas you start to get more granular, it starts to not be as effective. It works well from us from a conversion standpoint, but we're looking at correlation of, okay, the goal of this was to drive athletic sock purchases. Those have been a little bit tougher for us to see that one for one correlation than starting at kind of the high category level.
One thing I'll add
Okay.
to that too is I get that question a lot when we have new customers coming in or, it's the start of the year and we're starting to think about what are the strategies in which we want to accomplish. Within Simon, on every segment, we have the ability to put what we'll refer to as segment KPIs. So they're custom cards that live on every audience that you build, and they can average out what is the engagement rate like an email, what has the purchase count been, the average order value, etc. And you can see how that measures to the audience that you're building. A lot
Hmm.
of the times, too, we're going in and we're brainstorming. We think the ideal customer looks like this. How does it actually play out when we look at it from the KPI scenario and say, does this match what we were expecting? Yes or no? And it gives us that time to adjust the audience and learn from these things. We don't always have those answers, but we can use these tools to help get us to an answer so we can make the right decision of, okay, this is what they should look like. Send that one out for a lookalike or a suppression.
Okay. There's a question here about seasonality, and the person's asking, what do you do differently during off-peak, like summer, if that is off-peak, compared to the holiday season when socks are more in demand?
A great question. I would say a lot of testing. Now, primarily that is like when we go into our holiday season, normally on our end, we have done all of our testing for the year and we're executing on what we have learned that works. I think the other things that we think about too from a seasonality perspective is how do we adjust certain things in our content. We actually have more recently launched more summer products. We launched our first EVA slides. You can wear it at the beach and at the pool, and it comes to life in our photography style. So even though it's going to be a little bit seasonally lower, like our main focus is on that time is how do we prepare ourselves to be ready for our peak seasonality? And then number two, how can we still message things that have relevance during that time period as well? I'd say there's also a good amount of work that we do around filtering in and out unengaged customers from our email and SMS list. There's going to be certain people who live in hot parts of the world who aren't necessarily engaging with our content I'm in the middle of a heat wave right now in New York City, and layering in engagement criteria. If someone hasn't engaged with your messages in the last X number of days, let's keep them suppressed for now. And then when we get back into the holiday season and when we get back into peak seasonality, let's start increasing messaging and seeing if that gets them to be re-engaged with the brand as we get into our peak seasonal time period.
Hmm. Okay. That's great. So there's a question here too about the cross-selling and kind of expansion from the core line into building your own pack. Question is, can you detail more about what customer attributes or shopping behaviors you looked into when building this segment to expand from sock customers to build your own pack?
Yeah, absolutely. There were a few things that we looked at when we went to build. Basically, what we were trying to do is look at anyone who's purchased underwear or if there have been like key indicators that they might be interested in underwear. So when we're building out that segment in our email system, we're looking at the purchase data, which for us is the number one thing. That's the number one thing that's going to indicate if somebody is going to come back and retry an item. But we also look at, have they recently browsed an underwear page on site? So we do layer in the browse activity as well. And then the last thing that we have started to look at and add in as well is we now track all of the links in our emails. So we can say we have this email that talks about socks and underwear and slippers, but if somebody clicked on or engaged with the underwear section of that email, how can we also add them? So for us, it's how do we look at intent? And intent, I think, number one is going to come from past purchase behavior. That's going to be the biggest predictor, but also have they recently browsed those products or a collection page, or have they engaged with content of our ecosystem with that product? And that's how we've been thinking about it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that's good. And so there's a follow-up to what you were talking about before. And question was, do you have different onboarding journeys and timelines based on when customers are acquired?
And sorry, do you mind repeating the question?
They're asking whether you have different, if your onboarding journeys vary based on, and have different timelines based on when the customer was acquired originally.
That's a good question. Not necessarily based on timing of when the customer has been acquired. Our welcome journey and our onboarding timing tends to stay pretty consistent. I will say that some of the differences and shifts that we have made on the content is happening around, like, specifically post-purchase, what have they bought? So we have specific emails that will go out in our post-purchase series if you've tried bralette, with a few wear and care details for our EVA slide, how to clean them and wipe them down. That's something that has been an intentional effort on our end, is because now that we've offered so many products and it's not just socks, there's different things that somebody who has just purchased those products might need to be aware of. So again, that's another instance where we are using the trait syncing to sync in the last purchase behavior, and then being able to target content to just give them more information about the product that they're going to have out their doorstep in a week.
Mhm. Okay, that's great. And you knew this was coming, both of you. I'm sure some questions about AI. And I think Kelly, you said you're at an event right now where you're talking a lot about AI. So the question though, it says, are there any plans to build AI into the Bombas website so that when I'm shopping, I can have a conversation about my needs and get recommendations?
I'll defer that one to Michelle.
I
Okay.
will say we do have chat on site right now. A lot of it is live agents who are going to be able to help with all those questions. To be completely honest, I don't have a great answer to that. I know our customer happiness team here is probably thinking a lot about it and how to improve that, but I am not as privy to those conversations.
Yeah,
Could
and
we say possibly inevitable? Are those
Genuinely not sure.
genuinely not sure? Okay. That's
Go
fair.
ahead,
That's
Kelly. I
fair.
think Kelly has
yeah,
some
I was just going
great
to say
insight.
from the Simon perspective on AI, it's really how can we start to use data about customers and the data about what's around them to find and hone in on the right moments. So, for example, holiday and gifting is huge. We know calendar holidays are always going to occur at the same time. Mother's Day will
Mm,
always be in May, Father's Day is always that June timeline, similar with the end of year holidays. But
right.
birthdays vary. So, how can you use AI to maybe capitalize on what the gifting messages are? So you can
Hmm.
remind me in 12 months, hey, for your boyfriend's birthday, you got him socks. It's that time of year again, and prompt them to repeat that same gifting behavior about the holidays that are more important to, or I shouldn't say important, but more relevant to that individual consumer versus the mass marketed ones.
Okay. So there's a couple interesting questions. I think this one probably, Kelly, you might want to take a start at it at least. But you had talked about, everybody's talking about zero party data. That seems to be and for good reason, right? With deprecation of cookies. And you mentioned it as one of the big whys. Why is identity important? So you talked about that at the outset, but you really hit on the point that there's so much unrealized value in the third party data that's out there. And I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit more about that, because I think people maybe are almost overlooking an asset that's there.
Absolutely. There's so much about the customers at the zero party and first party data that are going to help you make informed decisions. But there is so much going on around all of us at any given time that's going to layer into any decision making pattern. How can we start to layer in that third party data and bring it in at that right moment? Weather is going to be different depending on where you are at any given time. And it's potentially going to change. Thunderstorms roll out of nowhere, different areas experience heat waves at different times. How can you capitalize on that to understand, hey, this is the mindset that somebody's going to be in their purchasing stage because of X, Y, and Z, what's going on around them. And to do that at scale is really where the AI comes in. My weather is going to be different from Michelle in New York. Most times out of the year, that's pretty standard. But as things start to fluctuate, how can you pivot your marketing strategy, what you want to share with them or what you want to tell them based on any given changes in maybe a weather and pattern, just for example. But trying to think of all the ways that all of our environmental factors change and how to best apply that into your marketing strategy, and then doing that at scale. Your customers are always going to be all over. You can't just pinpoint one type of campaign.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. And I'm just curious with you both talked about the high levels of anonymous traffic in the business and maybe and in particular, is it skewed a little bit higher maybe in the Bombas business, just the nature of it? Not sure, but I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how you balance the profile acquisition efforts that you have underway with privacy concerns, because I think the elegance is in the execution. You can gather all the data, know that you can contact somebody. The question is, when should you and how do you and what's that message? But could you talk about that just for a moment?
Yeah, I think for us too, and I think, I talked about this a little bit, but I think it's some of it is expected behavior, specifically with Bombas as a business, being that we sell socks.
Uh-huh.
And then also we don't typically run a lot of like promotions. So I think in terms of somebody actually signing in and explicitly identifying themselves, I think it's an expected behavior that we don't see that maybe as commonly as other brands or subscription brands or places where you really want to have your account information on site. But I think it really comes back to making sure that we're always being cognizant of privacy regulations, so having
Mhm.
additional layers, making sure that we're correctly identifying them, cross-referencing their opt-in status, being obviously very careful about that. But I think maybe a slightly different mindset just because I think that is expected behavior. We expect to have high amounts of anonymous traffic
Mhm.
versus some other brands where it might not make sense to have as high of anonymous traffic as we do.
Yeah. Okay. Anything to add to that, Kelly, or is that?
No, I think she said it perfectly.
She did. She did. So, as you were talking, Michelle, about that, there was a little follow-up question to the zero party and behavioral data. So, Kelly, either one of you might want to take this, but here's the question. What would you say is the level of value between zero party versus behavioral data? This person, at least, has found that zero party data related to opinion, what people say, little less reliable than the behavioral data, which obviously is what they did. So they're just looking for some feedback so maybe it can help them in what they're in their own work.
Yeah, I think from where I sit, I always try to layer back to what's the specific use case at hand, understand that first, and then the answer could pivot depending from there. But I do agree. I think the first party data of what they actually did is always going to be the most important because it's based in fact. That zero
Right.
party data, that more squishier data can help you maybe lean into more of that testing strategy of, okay, we know this for sure. This is what, is also out there. Could we use that to separate an A versus a B audience in a test? But it's definitely both valuable for sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And there are a couple more, but I think there are a couple more questions I'm just going to refer to you after the webinar. You can have a look and maybe respond to folks. You'll also have to, Michelle, navigate all the requests for free Bombas
Oh
socks,
gosh.
stuff like that. So that that was as inevitable as the AI question. So we knew that was going to happen. But I just wanted to thank you both, though. I know you're both in the midst of a lot of different things and fresh from the conference a couple weeks ago. So I appreciate you taking the time to do this, to tell the story. And I think it's one that's so applicable to any retailer that's working in the omni-channel kind of environment and trying to navigate the world online. Very important and well done. And so I just want to thank you both, Michelle Destein from Bombas and Kelly Sullivan from Simon Data. Great job, and thanks to CRMC for putting all this together. And just thanks everyone for being here. And we'll see you back here next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.